everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. You know, the human heart is just an absolute marvel of biological engineering. I mean, it's this tireless engine pumping life through our veins every single second of every day. But what actually happens when the literal plumbing of that engine gets clogged up? When the stakes are literally life and death, we have to rely on one of the most incredible feats of modern medicine, which is heart bypass surgery. So today, we're diving deep into the fascinating mechanics of this life-saving procedure. We're going to bridge that gap between the everyday questions we all ask and the really high-level science that surgeons practice. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's unravel this whole thing together.
Okay, let's dive into this. How does heart bypass surgery work? It's a plain English question, and man, it is just so incredibly relatable. Think about the emotional weight behind those words for a second. It's the exact phrase someone might type into a search engine late at night. Hands may be shaking a little bit when they or someone they love is facing a major medical moment. It doesn't use any fancy Latin roots or complex medical jargon. It just asks a direct, vital question. And really, this is the starting point of understanding that deeply human desire to know how a critical, life-saving fix to our own body actually operates. But here's the thing. To truly answer how that surgery works, we kind of have to shift gears. We have to leave that colloquial, everyday question at the door and step directly into the clinical reality of the operating room. And this is a totally necessary leap. To really grasp the mechanics of the surgery and the reality of the fix, we have to learn the language of the surgeons who actually perform it. We're transitioning from the familiar, comforting phrase of heart bypass into highly specific medical terminology. Now, I know it can feel like a steep learning curve at first, but honestly, it's really just a matter of breaking things down into their functional parts. And that brings us to the clinical heart of the matter, coronary artery bypass graft, which is often just shortened to the acronym CABG. Now, at first glance, CABG looks like super intimidating medical alphabet soup, but it actually blew my mind to realize that when you break it down, it's incredibly literal. It's basically a precise 4-word blueprint. Coronary simply tells us the location, the heart. Artery identifies the specific type of blood vessel involved. Bypass is the action, creating a brand new path around an obstacle or a blockage. And graft is the method, using a piece of living tissue from somewhere else in the body to create that new path. Suddenly, it isn't just a scary medical acronym anymore, right? It's literally a step-by-step map of the entire operation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive conceptual gap between the two ways we talk about this. Think about heart bypass surgery, that everyday term. It's broad, it's comforting, and it's totally understandable for us, but it definitely lacks mechanical detail. Then think about CABG, the medical terminology. It's dense, it's highly technical, but it tells the surgical team exactly what is happening anatomically. Both of these phrases describe the exact same life-saving procedure, but they speak to two completely different realities. And bridging that gap between the patient's broad understanding and the surgeon's anatomical blueprint, that is the absolute ultimate goal of clear medical communication. Central to all of this is one very important word, procedure. This word takes everything we just talked about and shifts it from abstract concepts into concrete, life-saving action. A coronary artery bypass graft isn't just a theory, folks. It is a meticulously planned procedure. Just imagine the environment for a second. The intense focus in the room, the ticking clock, the carefully orchestrated team of medical professionals working in absolute perfect synchronization. It is an active, highly structured, step-by-step physical intervention meant to solve a very specific critical problem, which is a blocked artery. It implies immense precision and a deliberate sequence of events where there is literally no room for error. Let's move to and see how this builds into 3 distinct conceptual steps. Because how do we actually get from that initial place of fear and confusion to total clarity? It's really a journey of human comprehension. It all starts with the inquiry, that really vulnerable moment of questioning how a bypass works from the patient's perspective. Then we hit that wall of clinical reality, diving into the intense medical truth of the CBAG procedure. But to truly cross the finish line of understanding, we need a magic key. And that key is visual animation. Because you realize very quickly that you can't just throw intense medical jargon at a terrified patient and expect them to understand it. You need a translation tool that guides us seamlessly from that initial scary question right through the clinical wall and finally into total clarity. Which brings us to the incredible power of animation and video. Why are these visual tools so absolutely critical here? Well, because when you're dealing with the dynamic, 3-dimensional, moving plumbing of the human heart, text alone completely fails us. Words can attempt to describe a graft or a bypass, sure, but trying to picture it perfectly in your head, it's just overwhelming.
Animation isn't just a fun little option here. It is a strict necessity. We have to rely on these dynamic visual formats to do the heavy lifting of explaining a complex, physical, internal process. So the crucial point is that this is exactly where animation becomes a superpower. Think about it. A surgical procedure on the heart is inherently intimidating, right? And it's entirely hidden from plain view inside the chest cavity. You can't just casually look at it. But visual animation allows us to peer inside the body safely. It completely demystifies the medicine. It miraculously strips away the blood, the urgency, and the intense stress of a real operating room. And it leaves behind only a clear, colorful, super easy to follow schematic of the heart's plumbing. It takes that intimidating internal procedure we just decoded and makes it 100% understandable to anyone seeking answers. And this brilliantly illustrates what a conceptual breakthrough this really is. On one side, we are faced with a massive problem, the intimidating wall of jargon that is coronary artery bypass graft. It's a wall of words that can so easily confuse and isolate someone who's already in a super vulnerable position. But on the other side, an accessible animated video completely shatters that wall of medical jargon. It hands the power of understanding directly back to the patient. It essentially acts as a promise that even if you start with an everyday question, and even if you get overwhelmed by the clinical reality, visual tools are the ultimate solution that will finally make everything make sense. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating thought to wrap up today's explainer. We've seen how visual tools like animation and video promise to decode the intense, high-stakes reality of a CABG procedure. And honestly, it really fills you with a sense of wonder. If a complex, life-saving surgery like a heart bypass can be completely demystified and decoded visually for absolutely anyone to understand, what other medical mysteries could animation solve for us? How much more empowered could we all be about our own health and our own bodies if every confusing medical term came with its own visual translation? Thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. Keep asking questions, keep leaning into your curiosity, and I will see you in the next explainer.